Good morning. So I'm working on a job. I've got a white oak island and pantry cabinets that I'm working on. The rest of the kitchen's going to be painted, like the periphery of all the cabinets, just in a some kind of white color. I forget the color it was. Nope, sorry, I'm wrong. It's gray. Ah, that's right. So used to doing white. Anyways, I've milled up all these pieces, and in all honesty, I didn't have the time to film that process. There's enough videos of people making shaker doors. You don't need to see another one. But there's an aspect of this that I do want to show you. I use 1/2 inch for my center panel for all my shaker doors. And the reason I do it is I like the fact that it's a little more substantial than using like 1/4 of an inch. So if you're using 1/4 of an inch, typically it might be a little bit shy and it flops around, and well, there's problems to it all. But anyways, if I use 1/2 inch, when I'm doing this, I have to put a rabbet on the inside because my groove is still 1/4 of an inch. So I have to make a rabbet on 4 sides all the way around this thing. But I have to do it accurately. So I've made sure that when I've milled everything, if it's 6 inches, it's 6 inches. If it's 12 inches, it's 12 inches. If it's 2.5 inches wide, it's 2.5 inches wide. It's perfect for each one. It's like a foundation of a house. If you've got the foundation done properly, everything should sequentially work off of that. So that's what I'm working on now. So I've got all my pieces milled, and I'm going to be doing the center panels, and I'm going to show you how I do the rabbet portion of it, because some of this is important, because picking the right blade is important, and knowing how to do this where you leave a proper gap for your doors when you're assembling these things. So that'll be the next part of this, and I'll take you along. Okay, so I want my groove here is 1/4 of an inch wide, 1/2 inch deep. I've set this for 5/16 right here. This is the back side of the drawer front or the door, 5/16, and this is 1/4 of an inch, just a little bit over 1/4 of an inch. So I don't want to bury this thing right to the end. I want to be a 1/16 short. So if this was, let's say my rail here was 12 inches, my panel would be 1/8 of an inch less than that, because I want a 1/16 of an inch shy here and a 1/16 of an inch shy in here. That way I know that my panel won't bottom out. That's going to be the key to this whole thing. So I want to be shy of 1/2 inch by 1/16, so my distance here is 7/16 is what I want to cut on that rabbet. So there we go. Now I'm using a blade here that's a fairly fine blade. It's actually the blade that you would use on a compound miter saw, because when it cuts through the plywood, it comes through at a shearing angle like this. It's a back angle of about, I think, a couple of degrees, as opposed to a hook angle, which would tear along the grain here. So anything cross-cut, a blade like this is perfect for that. So I've perimetered the whole thing like this. I'm left with just about 1/4 of an inch left here, and I'm going to be running it on the saw up like this to get that finished cut on the rabbet. All right, so here's what I'm after. There we are. You can see there's the rabbet joint. Here's my rail. I want that to fit perfectly in there, and you can see there's a 1/16 of an inch difference there, so that when I sand this, I'm not going to be touching my back panel at all. If I had flipped it around, you could see I'm almost flush right there. Okay, so this is what I want. I want it backside like that. All right. All right, so for the stand-up cut like this, when you're cutting this through here, I've got a very aggressive cutting blade here. This is the one I use for cutting solid wood. I'm okay with that because all I'm trying to do is just clear out the rest of the material here. The cut on here doesn't have to be 100% perfect. And the reality is with a sharp blade, you still get it, but it'll cut it clean and it'll cut it fast. And that's what you want. A combination blade will also work. That's a good choice as well. But don't use the same blade you use for cutting that first cut. It's just you're asking that blade to do more than it was ever intended to do. All you want to be able to do is switch out to a little more aggressive blade and you'll get a better cut through it. All right, so here's my test piece, and you can see I assembled it. I put all these joints tight, and you can see there's about a 32nd of an inch gap right here, which means I have to adjust this a little bit further that way to get that to clean up nice and tight. So I have to move that just slightly to make sure that that's perfect. So here's the end result. Everything is nice and perfect put together. There, squish that down. I got a nice tight joint all the way across it. And you look, there's not a gap at all in here. This center panel will not move once it's glued into position. It won't shrink and it won't expand, but it'll give that final structure to this piece. So when I sand this thing through my wide belt sander, everything will come out nice and clean. So I'm just going to show you again as I do this panel here. I got a mark here, and that's where I'm going to be putting my hand. It's not going to come anywhere close to the blade, and I want it by this. Basically, I put a little green line on here, and I can see it on the top. I actually know it just by looking at it. But the important thing with this blade, being a ripping blade, if you get a finer blade, you'll find that this thing wants to actually travel upward. If you've got an aggressive blade with a positive hook on it, it'll actually want to pull it down more than it wants to ride up. So watch this. There we go. Even if you have to go into this a little bit, it's not that big of a deal, but you want to have a nice tight shoulder all along here, and you want that consistent for your thickness of your groove. So, getting ready to assemble these things, I just want to show you some critical parts when you're putting these things together. Now, when you do it this way, the door will self-square itself, so you don't have to check to see if it's square or not. If your panel was cut square, the door will be square. But when you're making this this panel to fit in the groove, you don't want it loose, you don't want it tight, you want it just about right. That's how it should be. Okay, so very easy to assemble, but it still has some grip to it like that. Okay, so when I'm doing this, I also want to be able to just give it a quick sand. I got 180 grit, so I'm dropping about 1 grit. So this is factory sanded to 220. I'm going to bring it to 180, and that'll be my finish for all my doors. You don't need to do much with this. All you're trying to do is get the scratches off it. And I put it up to the light, and I look down the panel, and if I see any kind of anomaly, I'll sand it again. But I want to make sure that any kind of scratch lines are out of it, and it should be very dull in the finish. So assembly is fairly simple again. Okay, there's the face and it has all my numbers on it. So all I'm going to be doing is basically putting the thing together like this. Put a rail up. And whoop, this way. There we go. Okay, and everything self-squares itself up. So you can see there's hardly any gap. If there is, it's maybe about, maybe a 64th at the most. But I want to make sure that when that goes together, that this is not going too long that way. If it's a little bit short, I'm okay with that. The finish will take that up into account, but it can't be too much. So right now that I've got this set absolutely perfectly. And here's the other thing. When you're gluing this up, right here, okay, I'm going to be gluing all the tenon here and the shoulders on both sides of this. So when you've got a stub tenon of about a 1/2 inch, you have to do your end grain. And you think, oh, well, the end grain doesn't hold much. You'd be surprised. The other thing is on this panel, I don't want to be doing, if I'm going to be putting any glue, I'm just going to be putting a very little bit on the inside of it here, because I don't want any glue to squeeze out past my panel. I can't have that at all. So that's the one important thing on the assembly. So I'm going to start that next, and I'll show you what the finished door looks like assembled. Okay, so gluing this, get glue on your tenon and on your shoulder, and stop about a 1/2 inch from the end, like that. Okay. Here. Okay, and the reason you stop right from the end there is you do not want the glue squeezing out onto the inside of your door. Okay. There we go. Okay. Yeah. When you're doing this, make sure you have no glue on your fingers, because you don't want that, certainly on a panel where you can't get the glue off anymore. Okay, because you can see where the glue, when I squish this down, it goes to about almost 1/4 of an inch to the end there. Right. I want to make sure that I clean up the glue on the back side. Okay, that's the part that's going to be against your clamp. Because if you have tons of glue squeezing out, it'll make a mess of your clamps. All right, so I line this up, make sure that that's perfect. Okay, and then tighten that up. Just tap that, that's all you have to do. Okay, take the glue off. And you can see right there, you can see the glue went right to the end of this, at the end of this tenon. Same thing here, you can see a bubble of glue right there. So I know that I'm getting coverage all the way down that rail. And then on the back side, everything's nice and tight. Perfect, and that panel won't move around. And it'll be perfectly solid. All right, just want to show you the glue coverage on this. So when I put this on, okay, here we are. Okay, I'm just going to take it off for a second and show you how much glue right there. Okay, and you can see it's all down through the tenon and onto the shoulders there. So that is the glue coverage that you want. When you put it on evenly like that, that's what you can expect. So this is the next day, and I want to clean off the glue that has squeezed out. So it's had overnight to dry up, so it's in excellent condition right now. Now when you do this, take your glue scraper, and don't try to pull towards the end here, because you'll have a tendency of breaking this out, or going this direction and breaking out into this corner here. Or worse, scratching that panel. That's the one thing you do not want to do. So just pull short strokes to get most of the glue off as possible. It makes quite a difference if you can get as much off when you're gluing up, but some parts, especially where it's resting against the clamps, you can't get that off. I just go until I stop hearing it kind of nick the top of the glue here, and then I know at least it's good enough to go. So this now is perfectly flat. Well, I shouldn't say perfectly, but it's if you wanted to sand that with a palm sander, you could definitely get away with it. But this is all going to go through the wide belt sander. Quick tip with sharpening glue scraper here: get yourself a very fine file like that, and just go down your file it down your scraper like this, and you'll hear it starts making a bit of a grunting noise. And once you start hearing that, you know you're starting to peel off a decent amount of metal, and then you feel it until it gets a hook on it. So right now I'm not feeling that hook on there. Yeah, right there. That's perfect. Okay, this thing's an old scraper, but that's all I ever do. And this thing's probably about 20 years old. Okay, so I've got all the doors assembled and I cleaned off all the glue. Now I'm going to be putting them through the wide belt sander here. So this thing's it's a pretty basic machine. It has a belt that draws the material into the machine, and it's got a belt inside that is tracked by air. So if you hear it, you'll hear a little bit of hissing, and that is air passing by a sensor that reads the belt as it tracks. So I'll show you what's on the inside of it. And then everything is pneumatic. And there's the belt. That's the final pass here at 180 grit. Okay, so I'm going to clean up these panels right here. These are drawer fronts, and they're going to be finished out at 11 7/8. So right now it's just over 12 right now. So I'm going to be trimming on both sides. So I took my planer and just cleaned up a little bit of the glue that was on the ends. And that's all good to go. Oh, that one. There we go. So now I just hit both sides on the edge sander, and I got to clean up this end here and this end here on the joiner, so I'll just be putting them up, and that'll finish them out to the exact size. So right now I'm just a heavy 11 7/8 by 26 7/8. So I got a 1/16 of an inch, so a 32nd off of both sides, and everything will be nice and clean. All right, so I'm pretty well at the end of this. I've got everything put together. It's been sized, sanded, and edge sanded all the way around. So it's at 180 grit sandpaper, so I'm gonna now do the final prep on it. So at the end of the day, is it worthwhile for me to do this? I can buy them cheaper than it costs me to make them for the sake of what it costs in the production. But I like the idea of building all my components. I just like having the control over it, and the fact that I can do a higher quality than what I can actually buy from a supplier. At the end of the day, this door will not fall apart because it's captured inside that frame. This whole center panel actually underpins the whole rest of the door, and there's no chance that this thing will ever slump or come apart. So that's one of the things I like about it. The other fact is when I machine all my parts, I know that all of it's going to be flat, and I'm not going to get a twist in a door or anything like that. So that's part of it, of the things that I do like about making the things for myself. Not everything I do has to be able to make a lot of money. At the end of the day, I want to make a good product that I'm satisfied with, that I can give to a customer. So hopefully this is helpful for you if you plan on doing something. It's a great way to do it, and it's a fun process. Anyways, have a great day.